This is FirstCoast.tv. We're here in the Ponte Vedra Cultural Center, and they're having a wonderful little dissertation. But before we get into that, I find myself with
Scott Grant of Standfast Asset Management. I'm a local historian, probably familiar to some of you.
And
I'm Michael Francis. I'm the Huff Family Chair of Florida Studies at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg.
all right. Now you're having a little dissertation here. What's the topic for today?
The topic today is really about Pedro Menendez de Avilés and the early colonists of St. Augustine. It's really an introduction to a long-term study that we've been working on for a number of years, trying to piece together who all the people were who came with Menendez in September of 1565, and explaining a digital resource, a site that we launched last year called La Florida, the Interactive Digital Archive of the Americas.
And what's the goal of that archive?
To build, the archive is really to share Florida's incredibly rich history. But the part that I'll be talking about tonight is a section in which we're trying to create a searchable digital database for everyone we find in the records who lived in Florida at any point from Juan Ponce de Leon's first expedition in 1513 to Florida's transfer as a territory in 1821. Thousands of individuals, men,
So
women.
if I go to that database and I put the name of someone who was in that period, it'll come up with information about that person. Then.
That is correct. And the
It
goal is
just
to...
a directory of names, or is it
No,
also
occupations and events
Okay.
and connecting individuals and tracking their movements and really creating a searchable, interactive database as a different way to convey, to share
So a digital
this history.
encyclopedia kind of thing.
In a sense, yeah, but with video,
Right.
with audio, with infographics that people can generate. So you could go onto the site and you could say, I'd like to know how many people from Asturias came to Florida in the 16th century.
Oh,
And who were they?
Okay.
I want to know how many barbers came on a certain expedition. And I'll be talking about some of these
All right.
individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll cover a little bit. And Scott, what interests you about this whole project?
Well, this project's great, and I've seen Michael do the presentation a couple times, but it's great because he's taking these old records that are essentially handwritten in an ancient form of Spanish and then converting them into English that we can understand. And he mentioned, the names and the occupations. One of the things that always fascinates me is the descriptions. The people, because at that time there weren't identifications, they would write down some description. There's one guy in your study that's tall, dark, and handsome, right?
That's right. And he has 2 scars on his face, one on his forehead. And then the next guy who comes up is round and fat with a big nose. And so we have about 400 physical descriptions of people who came to Florida in the 16th century. So absent of any portraits, which we don't have, that is the closest we can get into what did people look like who came on these early expeditions.
When you were putting this archive together, was there one thing that was a wow moment, something that popped, and you said, "Oh my God, I didn't know that"? I mean,
well, there have been many.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most enriching parts of the entire project is you start to get to know some of these individuals. One of the episodes that I'll talk a little bit about tonight is, speaking of one of those wow moments, there was a woman who came with Pedro Menendez de Avilés in 1565. She was on his flagship. She's not registered in any of the Spanish archives. We didn't know about her until we uncovered some documentation about her at the National Archive in Mexico. And in fact, this woman got married in St. Augustine in 1565. It is the oldest documented marriage we have for any region of the United States.
wow.
It's the oldest documented Christian marriage, I should say. And the woman was a free black woman from Seville.
Wow.
The man was a soldier from Segovia, Spain. So the oldest documented marriage we have for what becomes the United States is an interracial marriage from 1565 that occurred in St. Augustine. And that's just one of hundreds of wow moments with this project.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. The woman's name's like Donna, is that right?
No, it's Luisa de Abrego. was
Luisa
the
de
woman's
Abrego.
name.
That's right.
Luisa de Abrego was her
All
name.
right.
Hmm.
That's cool. That's cool.
But it's fascinating, you think about what you can do with computers these days, and these records have been sitting in Spain and other places, but a lot of them in Spain for hundreds and hundreds of years, just sitting there waiting for somebody to come along and begin to translate them and make them available. And that's a mammoth undertaking. And I think one of the coolest things I've seen on the history side in a long time.
Wow. Well, I thank you both. I look forward to the dissertation. I'll stay a little while with it. And is there a website that we can go to get more
Yes,
information?
the website is laflorida.org.
All right.
And we have about 4,500 people already in the database.
Wow.
We have some short videos. We created a few fonts that you can write in 16th century letters, and you can send
funny.
emails in 16th, 17th, or 18th century letters that we drew from original documents related to Florida.
And if someone wanted to contact through email, there's a way to that website to send an email.
Yes, so there's
also?
a way to send an email.
Okay.
You can contact us. We will certainly get back with you, and we're excited.
All right.
I was just going to say, people like that interactive stuff. I mean, that's what we always hear. Is that true? Do
Yeah,
you
it
find
is
people
true.
going on the
It is,
website and
yes.
actually writing the emails?
Yes.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do
Valentine's,
that. I'm going to have to do that
Okay,
now.
please,
I'm going to have to do
please
that.
do.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. So Menendez's flagship, the San Pelayo, was 909 to 1,000 tons, this ship. And he was required on this one ship to take 77 sailors, 18 artillerymen, the 299 soldiers. When the Crown learned that the French were there, the Crown said, all right, we'll pay for 300. They paid for actually 299. There were probably on this ship closer to 500 to 600 people on this ship, including supplies. It's a magnificent story, this story of the San Pelayo. One of the individuals on that ship, and someone who's not recorded in any of the Spanish documents, no license for this person, is a woman who appears in a record that we found a few years ago in Mexico, in the Inquisition papers in Mexico City. And the woman's name was Luisa de Abrego. She was a native of Seville. And what you see before you, this record here, is a recording of the oldest Christian marriage anywhere in the United States, including Puerto Rico. We don't have one that's older that has survived from before this date. It's a marriage between Luisa de Abrego and a Spanish soldier named Miguel Rodriguez, who was from Segovia, Spain. What's striking about this document is Luisa de Abrego was a free black woman. In other words, the oldest surviving marriage record we have for what becomes the United States is an interracial marriage between a free black woman from Seville, Spain, and a Spanish soldier. Now, the marriage didn't end very well, which is why it's in the Inquisition records, but we'll get to that another time. It's a fascinating story. And so within a few years, all of these garrisons, except for St. Augustine and Santa Elena, were gone. By 1587, a year after Francis Drake attacked St. Augustine's the only one left. That's it. Of this beginning plan, St. Augustine's the only one who that survived. Our project started really with such a basic question. We wanted to know who these folks were. We called them conquistadors. But who were they? How old were they? Where were they from? What were their occupations? What level of education did they have? Were they single or married? Did they have previous military experience? What made a conquistador? A conquistador. And apparently, we started with I guess they look like this. Conquistadors don't smile, we know that. They never told a joke. Nothing was funny to them. They probably didn't bathe much. They looked rather serious, and they were armored and armed and kind of nefarious ne'er-do-wells. Very different from the people we call settlers. Settlers have nice buckles and shoes. They like pumpkin pie. They share turkey. Conquistadors would never share. No, we're conquistadors. They are settlers. We wanted to know who they were. And so they're already prioritizing it. This is what the entries look like. So you have somebody like Francisco Sanchez, who was a soldier and a barber. Now remember, in the 16th century, barbers also performed minor surgery. They didn't just cut hair and make you look pretty. They did other things. And he was a native of Barco de Avila. This is a bin. You can go to Barco de Avila in the province of Avila and see this magnificent 12th century castillo in Barca de Avila. But this is how we find out initially. Names, occupations, where people were from. Francisco Lopez, Father Lopez, one of the most famous characters in St. Augustine history. This is a statue, a 20th century statue of Father Lopez. Here you have Father Lopez wrote an account of the Menendez expedition. Magnificent account. It should be in all 5th grade textbooks. It's not, but nor is most of the interesting Florida history in any of the textbooks. The textbooks for Florida, I don't know, they somehow managed to make Florida history boring. And, you know, one of the things that is not mentioned as often about Pedro Menendez de Avilés is, yes, he established St. Augustine, but he was probably one of the most, let's just say he was the defendant in a lot of legal cases back in Spain from people who came to Florida who said that Menendez did not honor his contract. Part of his contract was he was supposed to provide food and supplies for people for a year from the time they got on the ships. Well, what happens when people didn't get their supplies? Well, they sued him. And so this is one of many cases. This is a 900-page document. It's just one of dozens of these kinds of cases that lists the 300 soldiers that the crown paid to come to Florida in 1565. So you get Gabriel de Salcedo, you get Diego Flores de Robles, who was a